Welcome to Proudly Jewish, Conversations on Israel and Jewish Identity. Today I'm joined by a special guest named Howard Lovy. He's a journalist, book editor, audio producer, podcaster, ghostwriter, I'm sure lots of other things. And I don't know him from those things at all. I know him because he writes about Israel and Jewish issues. He writes news and analysis. And I, in particular, came across him on Twitter, now x.com. And I've been following him for several years. And I really wanted to get his opinion on October 7th and the aftermath. And Howard, welcome. Thanks for being my guest.
Thank you. You know, my family has a hard time determining what I do for a living, too. A little bit of this, a little bit of that.
A little bit of this, a little bit of that. Well, wonderful. And I suspect that we won't touch much about the other things, and we'll focus more on Jewish and Israel and go from there. Although there's going to be a crossover, I know, at some point, because we'll talk about your upcoming book, and we'll get to that. So let's jump right into it. Why I started this podcast was because my congregation, I'm a cantor, my congregation wanted to, and people I knew wanted to talk about what they had just seen. We're not in Israel. We're here in North America, in the States is where I am, and people are grappling with it. This is the greatest massacre of Jews since the Holocaust. And I started it as a Zoom session, and it turned into a podcast. So you are somebody who thinks a lot and writes a lot about anti-Semitism and deals with Jewish community and Jewish issues and Israel. Please talk to me about what October 7th meant for you, both like when on that weekend and in retrospect now. What does it mean for worldwide Jewry?
That's a big question.
Yeah, in 5 words or less.
Yes. Like you say, I've been writing about this for a long time, and not only professionally, but personally, I come from, my grandfather and other relatives are Holocaust survivors. I had a lot of family die in Auschwitz, and I grew up hearing stories about the Holocaust. It's one of the reasons why I became a writer in the first place. And my grandfather always warned me, this could happen again. And, as an adolescent, I dismissed it. No, of course not. What are you talking about, old man? But as I grew older and really studied it, yeah, it could. So when October 7 happened, first of all, personally, I had just turned 58 years old. It was the day was my birthday. And I was, to celebrate my birthday, I was doing a half marathon. And that morning I got the news and then tried to run 13 miles. But that was really just weighing on my mind. What shocked me was not so much the massacre itself, but the reaction to it, the worldwide reaction, which is basically, we want more dead Jews, unfortunately. And that in itself is also sort of, again, kind of growing up with this, with these stories, having covered it as a journalist. I know this could happen. What surprised me was the speed.
Yeah.
Where you go from point A to point B, and it's just bang, people out in the streets, not in defense of the innocent people who are murdered and tortured and raped, but in favor of the murderers and torturers and rapists. And the speed really surprised me. And I guess in retrospect, I shouldn't have been surprised. But we're at a whole other plane of existence right now. It's 4 months to the day right now that it's happened, and my life is completely changed.
Yeah, mine as well. To this day, when I see someone in the community, not every single person, but a lot of people, how are you? How are you doing? There's that cloud, because nothing is the same for Jews since October 7th, whether they live in Israel or outside of Israel. So I hear you. And you mentioned the speed, the reaction. that I think, like you, I have always known from childhood that anti-Semitism was in the ether, that people can turn against us, the potential. When no one understands what the reality is until they're facing it, it seems to me. So even I, and I'm hearing this in what you're saying, knowing this is in the ether, knowing that it could turn, we're still not quite deer in headlights, but shocked in some ways. It's like, what, to this extent? Oh, the day after? So October 8th, there were demonstrations. There were, the social media was on fire the other way. And, so talk to me then about if you saw what you did see coming. The anti-Semitism, you've been writing about anti-Semitism for years, well before October 7th. And you mentioned just now, and you saw the potential was there. What did you see? Did you think it was getting worse over the years? And not so much talk to me about what you thought it was going, where anti-Semitism was going before October 7th, and sort of what specifically surprised you.
Well, I had seen this kind of slow buildup over the last 10 years. It gained speed, in I'd say 2016. Just a little bit about me personally. I was a managing editor at JTA in the early 2000s, where we actually talked about the end of anti-Semitism, if you can believe that. How are kids going to be? How are they going to connect with Judaism if anti-Semitism goes away? And so I covered this launch of the Birthright program and things like that. Time goes by. I got into other things. I started writing about science and technology instead of religion because I thought, well, with that, things either are or aren't. But then in 2016, when Donald Trump started running for president, it started with the right wing in terms of a surge in anti-Semitism. Suddenly Jewish reporters, for example, were being told to go to the ovens, and people were noticing, well, something's going on here. What's happening? It quickly jumped the fence from right wing to left wing, and my argument has always been there's no right wing or left wing anti-Semitism. It's a disease of opportunity, and it's found fertile ground among the left for various reasons. But I guess, what was the original question?
Well, no, go ahead. This is perfect. You're addressing something that is extremely on my mind. What is more dangerous, the anti-Semitism from the right, which you see, or the anti-Semitism on the left, which I think I would phrase it as is part of another conversation. It's part of social justice. It's part of other ideology. And
there's an assumption that Jews are on the wrong side of social justice, and that's because of centuries of people being told that Jews are part of the power structure, that we're invisible puppeteers, and that transfers to Israel. What's interesting about the protests after October 7th is that these protests against Israel began before Israel actually responded.
Yeah.
So, when you're told, well, we're not protesting against Jews, we're protesting against Israel and what's happening in Gaza, that's just simply not true. It happened before Israel even responded at all.
Well, so go ahead.
Yeah. Well, so what I'm doing in my book is kind of, I went through all the stages of grief in the first few weeks, and I had very little to say because I was processing it all. And then I thought, well, what can I do? And how can I not feel so helpless? And so that's what I got the idea for this book on shining a light on people who are actually successfully fighting anti-Semitism.
Right now, we were talking about left and right, and in one way, at one point, you said a moment ago that the anti-Semitism shouldn't be looked at that way, left or right. It's an ideology of optimism, of opportunity, or something like that. You said,
Yeah,
and
disease.
a disease. Please elaborate on that, and then we can get to. I think it's extremely important. How do we confront anti-Semitism? So that's the topic of your book. But let's first understand sort of what this thing is and where it's coming from and where October 7th falls into all this.
Right.
So please elaborate on that left versus right and why you reject this
Yeah,
separation.
I don't want to get political. My book itself is not political. You could be
Okay.
conservative or liberal to read it. But the issue is what anti-Semitism is, and it's the
Yeah.
oldest conspiracy theory, like Deborah Lipstadt says. And when you reach the fringes of the far left and the far right, you get into conspiracy theories. The far right believes that Jews are engaged in some secret cabal to control things, and the far left believes the same thing.
Mm.
So that's where anti-Semites can, or anti-Semitism, the phenomenon, can take advantage of this natural, I guess, assumption about Jews, and other people have talked about this too. It's called the horseshoe theory, where the far left meets the far right. But it doesn't mean that the right wing is inherently anti-Semitic or the left wing is inherently anti-Semitic. It just means that it's an easy way for people to make sense of the world. If you're far left and you believe in everything is oppressor versus oppressed, and you have sort of imbibed the whole sort of theory that Jews are somehow oppressor, then it doesn't take that much leap to say, well, Jews are on the wrong side of this oppressor-oppressed um, formula, despite evidence,
Yeah.
um,
So there's something that I've seen a lot in social media, and that is on my posts, on my YouTube videos, on plenty of others that I've seen. Everybody, there's plenty. There's almost a tsunami of hate in terms of comments, in terms of responses, and I don't want to say they all, but one common thread that I see a lot of is this rejection of the label anti-Semite or anti-Semitism by these people who are filled with hate and are attacking. And they will say, I am anti-Israel, not anti-Semitic. I am critical of, that sort of thing. And I reject that because I see what they're saying, and I think you're touching upon this. Can you talk to us about this? Because what's your answer to that? The person is saying, no. Of course you're going to label me anti-Semitic. That's an old tactic. I'm simply critical of, or what have you.
It's what the kids call gaslighting. It's I'm just putting this out there, and you're interpreting it as anti-Semitic. It's you, not me.
Yes. Right.
But and that makes sense in theory. This whole idea that criticism of Israel isn't anti-Semitism, and as two Jews, three opinions about Israel. We're all critical of Israel in one way or another. But that's not what I'm actually hearing. What I'm actually hearing is from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is a call to genocide of 7.5 million, Israelis, and not all of whom are Jewish, by the way. But it's sort of this. It's what they can tell themselves. I'm just critical of Israel. But when you take a deep dive into it, what exactly are you talking about? It's sort of like when they say the occupation.
Yeah.
What exactly is being occupied? Are you talking about the West Bank? Okay, there's legitimate difference of opinions when it comes to that. Gaza, well, there was no occupation there until uh, October 7. Are we talking about Israel itself? Is that occupied land? Is that what you mean? Or is it Jews existing anywhere? What exactly are we occupying? So it's a buzzword that when you kind of drill down, you think, what exactly are they talking about?
Well, that's the thing. It seems to me, I mean, you're hitting the nail on the head. It's disingenuous. I think they mean, I can't speak for every single person, but on the whole, you're on their land, you're colonizers,
Right.
and we hear it. We saw this in these rallies that happened October 8th and on. We don't want no two states. We want all of it, or
Oh yeah.
we want 48. I mean, I feel that the tenor of the, I don't want, pro-Palestinian, free Palestinian movement, the activists, has changed over the years. I mean, they were consistent in many ways, but they're more overt, perhaps is the better word. Now
More overt, yeah.
right?
But they've never been in favor of a two-state solution. I learned that the hard way.
Yeah.
Back in the day, I was an Oslo optimist, and when I first took that job at JTA as managing editor, I thought, wow, things are really happening now. There's going to be peace between Israel and the Palestinians. There's going to be a Palestinian state, and we'll work things out. Then I covered the Yasser Arafat, Ehud Barak, and Bill Clinton Camp David summit when I was at JTA, and the Palestinians were offered the best offer that they were ever going to get for a Palestinian state, and they said no, and instead launched a second intifada, and that's when I sort of gave up on the whole thing. That's when I quit writing about Jewish issues for about 16 years and went off and did something else. I was so disgusted with it. But the idea that they wanted a two-state solution was shattered for me.
Yeah.
Oh, that's not what they want. But this is the politically correct talking point. When you hear media coverage, when you hear politicians talk about it, the two-state solution. I don't know who believes in it anymore.
Yeah. We're hearing a lot about it right now in the news. A lot of talk right now from, I don't know if it's Blinken, Biden, media, but we're hearing a push for that. And I don't know any Israeli that doesn't want a resolution to the conflict. And I also don't know any Israelis that are happy with the idea of, in some ways, rewarding the actions of October 7th with a state, and also not just rewarding, but trusting what that state would be like. And look, in some ways, we're getting back to the idea of anti-Semitism. We're talking, in some ways, politics here, but I want to underline that there's a direct impact to anti-Semitism here, right? The idea, and you talked about this a moment ago, from the river to the sea, we're talking about a genocidal chant that calls for the removal of Jews, the ethnic cleansing or worse, of half the world's Jewish population. And see, okay, going back to my first question, I think we're dealing with October 7th, that shock about how quickly things turned. For me, it was also, as we talk, it was also the degree of, well, the mask is off. You really are saying, we support October 7th. We support the removal of the colony of Jews that are there, and by any means. What we saw on October 7th, the horrors that we saw on October 7th, I couldn't believe. Here's something that I couldn't believe, was the degree to which people were okay with the most savage acts of the most savage atrocities I think anyone has ever seen with their own eyes in modern times.
Yeah. If you believe that Jews are this, are the secret, puppeteers for the world, and Israel is which kind of represents Jews on the world stage, is a secret puppeteer, and it's the bad guy, and are colonizers and took over other people's land, and all these kind of presumptions. It's an apartheid state, and all these things that they say. Then you're ready to take on anything. You're ready to justify any kind of atrocity in the name of well, they're freedom fighters. So it doesn't take it doesn't take a lot, because society has been sort of conditioned to believe this, and a lot of it has to do with because I come from Holocaust survivors in my family, Holocaust guilt. It's well, aha, you Jews are no better. Look at the genocide you're perpetrating in Gaza, even though I don't have to tell you this is not a genocide. It's more of how I got you, Jews. The Holocaust was bad, but that wasn't us. And look what you're doing right now.
And that's Holocaust reversal, right? Which is an anti-Semitic act in and of itself.
Yeah.
Now, you spoke just a moment ago about society being conditioned for this, and that to me is huge. That we've been seeing, I don't know if particularly, but I feel it's particularly in the universities, a new generation that is being taught to see or accept the murder and ethnic cleansing of half the world's Jewish population as restorative justice, and as perhaps even a moral imperative, which is another way of saying what you just said. And I worry that these are tomorrow's leaders. I worry that the president of tomorrow, not necessarily the next election, but the president of tomorrow in the States will have this type of thinking. And I know that you've looked into anti-Semitism on campuses and the future, and you've written, I think just recently, maybe even yesterday, whatever you think, you said something like this. I'm paraphrasing. Whatever you think, no matter how bad you think it is in universities, it's worse. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, that's because I'm doing a lot of interviews for my book, and I'm talking to students. I'm talking to people who are handling it from a legal framework, and I'm hearing stories not just in college but in high schools, middle schools, where Jews are being singled out and harassed and worse. And it's gotten to the point where we're not talking about just name calling on the playground, but we're talking about physical attacks for physical safety. So here we have sort of the stirrings of pogrom, really. And there have been a couple instances in the last 4 months where things almost got to pogrom level. And the way that it's justified is you're Jewish or you support Israel, therefore you are all of these things that we've been told is bad.
Right.
And part of it, it's fashion, I guess, but part of it was also it was planned. You hear about all this money from Qatar going into universities. Where they have some influence over curriculum and hiring of teachers and things like that. So, yeah, it's bad, and I was even shocked at how bad it was. I went through some mild anti-Semitism when I was in college, and this reveals how old I am. But back in 1985, I was singled out because of my pro-Israel stance, and it wasn't pretty, but it taught me a lot of things. I felt isolated, so I know how isolating that can be for college kids right now. But there are ways to fight it. There are existing laws, and there are laws coming down the pike that will help Jews assert their rights again. But we're a very vulnerable minority. What are we? 0.2% of the world population. But people think we're more powerful than we are, because of anti-Semitic tropes about Jewish power.
Yeah.
But if the whole world decided to get rid of its Jews, they can do it. They've tried. So there's only so much we can do in terms of how we can, express our Jewish pride and fight back. But it also takes convincing of the non-Jewish world.
Interesting. I'm looking at how do we deal with anti-Semitism? And then I think that this is where we touch upon the subject of your book. But you have someone like Barry Weiss, who wrote a book on anti-Semitism, and is also of the opinion, not just regarding anti-Semitism, but regarding several issues, believes that you cannot change these legacy institutions, that you have to build new ones. And, I'm remembering I lived in Hamilton, Ontario, and there was a congregant who was a founder of the local golf course, and a very elderly person. And why did he found this golf course? Because Jews were not allowed in the main golf course of Hamilton at the time, years ago. So he built a new one. So you have someone like Barry Weiss who says, let's build new institutions. And you said there are ways to fight, and that it's important to fight, because if the non-Jewish world wants us gone, we don't stand much chance. I'm paraphrasing, of course. And so tell us about your book. What's the goal, and how do you fight it? And I think that, tell us about your book.
Yeah. Well, the book is a work in progress. It was originally just a background. It was my idea to not only do something, for myself, and the only thing I know how to do reasonably well is write, so that's what I can do. But I wanted to see if there was support in the wider community. So I launched a Kickstarter campaign. Now, Kickstarter it's a crowdfunding service that does mainly, I don't know, comic books, games, things like that. So I thought, well, is there enough support out there for this kind of a book? Because I wanted it to be a collective thing and not just me talking off the top of my head about how to solve anti-Semitism. I want people involved. So after a month-long campaign, I was funded, surprisingly so, primarily off of my or formerly Twitter followers and other people too, who said, "Yeah, let's do this together." So I'm talking also to donors and getting their ideas as well. There are ways that we can fight it in various spheres. From college campuses is one of them, but there's also online. There's also in the workplace. There's also in the political arena. I'm taking these in various segments and saying, okay, things are looking bad right now, but take a look at this person here and see what he did, and take a look at this person there and see what she did, and how they successfully fought it on their campus when their pro-Israel group was kicked out. Here's what they did: they used this law and they used that law, and they got their rights asserted. So yeah, the separate thing, I'm a fan of Barry Weiss, and I think she's a great writer, and she wrote an amazing book. But we did that. We did that in the early part of the 20th century. We founded our own hospitals. We founded our own country clubs. We launched things that are for Jews because the non-Jewish world wouldn't let us in. Then we took it a step further during the 60s, and we launched, well, not just during the 60s, but during the whole labor movement too, in the early part of the century, we founded a lot of social justice organizations that we're now finding that we're being kicked out of.
Wow.
Because the new definition of social justice is Jew as oppressor rather than oppressed. So, there's always this push and pull in the Jewish community between whether we want to be separate or whether we want to engage. And I think it's a healthy debate, but I don't think we can just live in a vacuum. I don't think we can. I don't think we can simply disengage from everything. Why shouldn't a Jew go to Harvard? It's one of the best colleges out there, allegedly. Maybe people can debate that now, but why should Jews feel uncomfortable going to Harvard? Why do we have to found our own institutions and start from scratch again when that experiment has already been tried?
By the way, for our viewers and listeners, the title of the book is From Outrage to Action, A Practical Guide to Fighting Antisemitism. I really like the From Outrage to Action. I'm good at the outrage. I don't know how good I am at the action. I think I'm good at discussing it with my members of the community, so there's awareness and perhaps encouraging action. But I see groups like there's AndrewHatred.com or Lawfare Project, and then there are individual ones. There was a student named some student at the University of Penn that I've heard of these stories where they successfully, through law and other ways, maybe even the public forum, find ways to defeat something. I also like, and this goes back to when I was asking you about left and right anti-Semitism. I have worried for some time about, I get the horseshoe thing, but to speak, practical terms, the anti-Semitism on the left, because Jews generally in America are of the left or on the left. The institutions that we seek to be a part of tend to be on the left, cultural, academic, and other.
Not just part of. We founded many of them. We were the driving force in these institutions that we're now being kicked out of.
And when the 2021 Hamas war occurred in spring, March, I think it was when it was launched, I really thought that the Jewish community of the States, those on the progressive side, and correct me if I'm wrong, but this is an opinion. I felt that the progressive left, these institutions were pushing us away at that point, a little more so than before. And I really wanted progressive Jews to step up and say, no, we want a seat at the table. We fought for this. We belong here. We share the same values. And this is the part where I'm asking for you to correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't see it happening. Was it happening? Were Jews in 2021 saying, no, let's help redefine or make sure that we're part of this movement? What was happening?
Yeah. I think there was shock. I remember the Women's March in the early days of the Trump administration, where suddenly the head of the Women's March was saying all this stuff about Jews and Zionists, and I was like, what is going on here? Jews have a voice in the women's movement, and there was. I protested, in the Women's March in my own hometown and held signs with, my in-laws are old hippies from way back, and I'm right there with them. And suddenly they got off on this sidetrack about Jews, and I was, genuinely perplexed. What does this have to do with it? And then, it kind of all came together that this is sort of, it's all connected to them, that oppression of women apparently is Jews' fault as well. Or some sort of, tied into Israel in some way. I still don't quite understand it.
Right.
But it's that whole worldview. I think many Jews were legitimately surprised. I spoke to one person who wanted to start her own alternative, women's march movement that never really got off the ground. I think it's many Jews are feeling homeless right now, Me personally, and I don't want to get political because I want this to be for liberals and conservatives alike. But for me personally, it's not going to you know, make me a MAGA Trumper. I'm not going to go the other way. Uh, I'm surprised and I'm shocked, but I'm not going to lose my liberal values or my progressive values because some progressives think I don't belong. You know what they call us are PEPs, progressive except for Palestine.
Oh,
That's the
interesting.
kind of derogatory name they call us. But no, I'm progressive, and my pro-Israel position is very progressive. It's decolonization. It's in favor of the indigenous people of Israel, which are Jews and Palestinians. So, um, I'm happy with where I am politically, and I don't need to say, okay, if I'm not this, then I'm going to go all the way to that. But
Yeah.
I think many Jews are feeling very torn right now. You know, we're okay with Biden. He's of the old school, but there are Democrats coming up who I don't know. We'll see.
Right, right. I spoke about, what does that president of tomorrow look like? There's a worry, and you can't you don't stand a chance if you don't stand up and stake a claim and go, we belong here.
Yeah,
And that's what you're saying. And
yeah. So
look,
the question is, do we stake a claim and say we belong here, or we should separate and
I
start our
see.
own Jewish institutions and say no, we belong outside? I don't know. It's a legitimate debate. I don't have easy answers.
Yeah, now you talked sort of about how we define ourselves in terms of our ideology and all that, but in your book with how to fight anti-Semitism, and we've touched upon this earlier, do you define anti-Semitism, and how important is it to define anti-Semitism, I'll and do you talk about the IRA definition?
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, there's a lot of misinformation about the IRA definition going on,
Mhm.
and you'll hear a lot of people a lot of reporters in the mainstream media say, well, it defines anti-Semitism if you're critical of Israel. No, actually, it doesn't. It specifically says that the criticism of Israel is not inherently anti-Semitic. It does say that unusual focus on anti-Semitism on Israel in comparison with other countries could be anti-Semitic.
Mhm.
Um, and I think it's the best definition that we have. Um, what's going on is, with sort of, and this is just purely my opinion, I think people don't really believe that that these alternate versions of definitions of anti-Semitism are better, but I think that it gives them permission to be anti-Semitic by claiming that they are just only being critical of Israel. Critical of Israel is I disagree with the Netanyahu government on A, B, and C, or I think the policy on carrying out the war should be
Mhm.
something different. That's criticism of Israel. Um, Anti-Semitism is Jews don't belong there.
Right.
Slaughter the Jews, from the river to the sea. Um, I like, I spoke with Nathan Sharansky last year. I was interviewing him in a different context, but he has his what he calls the 3D test,
Yeah.
um, where um, the delegitimization of Israel, the demonization of Israel, and the double standards in judging Israel.
Uh-huh.
If your criticism of Israel contains those three Ds, you're probably anti-Semitic.
I like that. I don't like the anti-Semitism, but I like the definition. That works. And how vital do you think it is? We're in a free society where we can have differences of opinion. How vital or essential is it in your opinion, to have a singular definition or agreed upon definition of anti-Semitism? And I know this is something that I know Michal Kotler-Wunsch, a member of Knesset, has been and I'm former Montrealer, and that's where I came across her years, when we were younger, has been fighting for that we should have that. Do you think that's vital, or do you think that we can carry on without having a singular agreed upon definition?
Oh, I think we need a singular agreed upon definition. Whether we can in this climate, I don't know. Individual states are doing it. Recently, just last week, Georgia adopted the IHRA definition of anti-Semitism, which is great. And there's only one Jew in the Georgia legislature. I paid particular attention to that because I grew up partially in Georgia and dealt with some anti-Semitism there. But yeah, it makes a difference because you need to, like you said, there's free speech. So you need to, what's the dividing line between stating your opinion on the street about an issue and being a bully against Jews, and harassing them. I was picking up my son from college in Detroit a few months ago, and I saw on the overpass, no Zionists in government. All right. Is that criticism of Israel, or is that code for let's get the Jews out of government?
Yeah.
You need a definition for that.
Do you think? Look, I'm clergy. I'm a cantor in a conservative congregation in the States. So I'm concerned about the following: that Jews in the future, as they grow, as the kids that are in K through 12, and as they go through university, if we hear more of those kinds of messaging, Zionists not welcome here, or the litmus test for acceptance in acceptable society is rejection of Zionism, of Israel's right to exist, and you as a Jew, your indigenous connection to this land. I worry that a generation may come up and go, oh, I have to give up this part of my identity in order to be accepted and to get ahead and to have friends and to be part of something, part of this that's important to me, part of that that's important. And that it's a redefinition of what a Jew is. And I worry, I don't think it'll win this effort, but I worry that it could, and that could that it could redefine, that Jews will choose to redefine. Do you think that that's going to happen, or are you confident that it won't?
I don't know. It's tough for a young person who's just beginning to sort of come into their own politically and understand what who they are, and to be told constantly that Israel does not represent Jews, and it's and is colonizing and is oppressing and committing genocide. The easiest thing to do is say, "Oh, okay, well then I'm an anti-Zionist Jew." And I don't know if many are doing it, but they might be winning on college campuses because it's easy. It's the easy way out. So that's why I think, that's part of the reason I'm writing this book. Who are the ones who are saying, no, that's not right. That's not what Zionism is. That's not what Israel is doing. And we do have ties to the land. It's hard, and it's something that each individual Jew on campus has to decide for themselves. The easy way, to apologize for being a Jew. You walk into a room and say, I'm Jewish, but I believe in freedom for Palestinians. I'm Jewish, but I'm not one of those Jews. I'm one of the good guys. As we know from Jewish history, that doesn't work. In the end, you're just a Jew. I told a joke. I don't know. I thought of it as a joke on X a few years ago that kind of resonated. It was a Jewish Zionist and a Jewish anti-Zionist walk into a bar, and the bartender says, "We don't serve Jews."
Yeah, right. It's a little bit. I mean, I can't smile at this, but That's what October 7th also showed us. You had a lot of Jews in the border of Gaza and those kibbutz communities who were very
Oh yeah,
involved in building bridges with Palestinians, and
they were.
right, and those who came to massacre didn't ask questions
They
about.
didn't ask who they voted for. They didn't
Right.
ask whether
Yeah.
they believe in a two-state solution. They didn't even ask if they were Jewish. There were non-Jews who were
Uh-huh.
massacred and kidnapped as well. They were
Yes.
there, and they were in Israel, and and they were killed because they were thought of as Jews.
You spoke. So your book, going back to your book, which is about action and confronting anti-Semitism. We spoke a little bit about sort of fighting it legally and other ways that are, real ways. And I came across you from Twitter, via Twitter, seeing your online activism and appreciating it greatly. And how important is the social media battlefield? Does it
I go
matter?
back and forth on that. A lot of people will tell you, well, Twitter or X or Instagram, that's not real life. That you get,
Mhm.
the fringes are amplified. But then you see what's happening on the streets, and the fringes are amplified there too. So there's a direct social media to action connection, where maybe at one time it was just, people in their mother's basements, writing their manifestos, but not anymore.
Mhm.
They're actually getting their marching orders from social media. So I think it's very real.
About your book, you mentioned that you had a Kickstarter campaign. Is are there other ways that people, or is that still going on, where people can support your efforts to publish this book?
Not right now. The Kickstarter effort is over, and now it's all up to me to write the thing.
Okay.
So that's what I'm busy doing.
Wonderful.
And as I interview people, I'm both disheartened. Like I said, things are worse than I thought it was.
Yeah.
But then I talk to some brave people, and I think, well, okay, things can get better.
So that's inherent in the title, I find.
Mhm.
There's a sense of optimism. Anti-Semitism can be fought. If it can be fought, we can overcome it. And I say overcome it because my question to you is, can it be defeated,
No,
or can
no,
we overcome it? And what does that mean? What does victory look like? What does it mean to fight it effectively and say, I won at the end of it all? I, the
right,
Jew,
right.
we Jews.
We have to define what victory means. A publisher told me, I like the idea of the book, but the way to fight it is with the IDF. That's what they're doing, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about asserting our rights. So the end game depends on what your goal is. If it's to get your pro-Israel student organization reinstated at your college. Is it to stop the harassment in the workplace? Is it to stop threats coming to you from social media? Is it having your voice heard in Congress, or even your local government that's coming up with anti-Israel statements all the time now? So it depends on what your definition of victory is. If is victory going to be the end of anti-Semitism? No,
Mm-hmm.
um, but we can fight it.
Yeah. I think we have no choice, right? We
Right.
have no choice. And I I wish you luck both with the book, but also with that fight.
Mm.
I think we all, in some way or another, are in the fight, whether we look at it that way or not. We all want to live this, in America. This was the golden Medina or something. There's this promised land in so many ways. The most successful, the most open society for Jews in the diaspora in the history of our people. And we need this to work. I'm a father of two young children. I want them to have a great future. I want them to not have to run away. And I don't want them to be blind to Jew hatred,
Mhm.
anti-Semitism. Howard Lovy has been my guest here on Proudly Jewish. keep your eyes open for his book. And again, it is called From Outrage to Action. And I don't know if there's a link yet, but I'll put a link to your website. Howard Lovy, thank you so much for being my guest today.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.